Space Coconut.
Okay, today let's talk about the upcoming perk changes and why the devs simply wasted their time reworking them. First, let's list out what the perks have been changed to. I'm only listing the tier 3 numbers for the perks because no one uses tier 1 perks unless they're forced to anyway. Perk tiers are yet another relic from the beginning of the game that needs to be removed, so who cares about those? First, let's talk about the new Tinkerer. When a generator is repaired to 70% repair progress, it triggers a loud noise notification and you're granted the undetectable status effect for 16 seconds. Now, this is how you buff a perk. Good job, devs! Simple number changes to make it better at its original job, no additional requirements or hoops to go through, and no complicated mechanics added to it to make it more attractive to use that just end up making it a cumbrance to use or ends up requiring a nerf to the perk. Very unlike Knockout. The new Knockout says, survivors put into the dying state by your basic attacks are not revealed to other survivors when they are standing outside of a 16-meter range. Survivors put into the dying state by your basic attacks crawl 50% slower for 15 seconds. During this time, survivors are affected by the blindness status effect. I imagine that in the devs' simplistic thinking, that Knockout was an okay perk that wasn't utilized as much as it could be. So they decided to buff it by preventing survivors from crawling away for a very short period of time for short-term slugging purposes, and prevented them from seeing the auras of their teammates for this same period of time. Now let me ask you this. If a survivor can only move 50% as fast while crawling, will they spend this time trying to crawl towards a teammate they can't see or recovering on the ground? Then, once they're at max recovery and they can see their teammates again, they can crawl towards their teammates at normal speed. So what is the point of these two conditions on this one perk? If one of those conditions were removed, maybe the new mechanics would have some use. If a survivor was only blind, they might still recover for 15 seconds until they could see their teammates and then crawl towards them. If a survivor could only move at 50%, they would do so towards their teammates. The effects would drive the survivor to take an action rather than driving them to simply stay put, which probably isn't accurate. The survivor's probably just going to stay there for 15 seconds if they couldn't move as fast or if they couldn't see where their teammates were anyway. Anyway, to compensate for both of these very powerful effects, the basic attack condition was applied to the perk. Let's not forget that this perk belongs to Leatherface, one of 8 killers who won't be able to utilize this perk since they have the potential to use their power to put survivors into the dying state. The new Knockout isn't bad, it's just overtuned. They only need to remove the blindness debuff and then allow Knockout to apply to any dying survivor rather than requiring a basic hit, and it'll be just fine. Swift groups will still render the perk useless, but that's a completely different video. Then, we have Lightborn. Unlike other beasts of the fog, you have adapted to the light. You are immune to blindness caused by flashlights and firecrackers. Survivors that attempt blinding you have their aura revealed for 10 seconds. This is a pretty unnecessary change. A 60% resistance practically nullified all attempts to blind a killer in any situation. Granting complete immunity, this kind of makes me go, okay. But then to tack on aura reading seems kind of silly. A survivor who's within your range of vision just tried to flashlight you. You should be able to see them, right? Why does that survivor need to have their aura revealed? Did an intern create these changes or something? If you wanted to give Lightborn a tiny buff, you could have used the ideas you used for Hillbilly's add-ons, Black Grease, and Mother's Helpers, and then spent more time rethinking the ridiculous changes you put Billy's add-ons through. For those of you who don't know what these stupid things do, here you go. Black Grease increases the resistance to blindness for 10 seconds after being stunned by a pallet. Kind of what Lightborn does right now without needing to be hit by a pallet. Mother's Helpers increases your movement speed by 0.2 meters per second or 5% movement speed when a flashlight is shining on you. In regards to Lightborn, if you wanted to make it better, keep it as it is with the 60% resistance, and then grant a speed boost for a period of time after having light shined on you, and then spend some of your extra time redoing those stupid add-ons. But for the most part, this buff was pretty unnecessary and kind of a pointless change since the original did its job just fine. Now, we get to talk about Franklin's Demise. Your vicious attacks make the survivors drop their item on impact. The lost item will be consumed by the entity after 90 seconds if it's not picked up before the timer runs out. Reveal the aura of items on the ground within 32 meters in a white aura. The aura of items fade to red until they are consumed by the entity. On paper, it sounds like a very good change for dealing with troublesome items. Unfortunately, thanks to one little oversight or deliberate decision, the perk change becomes a complete waste of time. Franklin's will not affect items deliberately dropped by survivors. This means that if a survivor stashes a key on the map to be used later when the hatch becomes available, it will be completely safe from the entity's consumption, and the killer would not be able to see its aura to plan ahead to play around the item. This problem really only affects keys, since they generally aren't used until the end of the match, but are arguably the strongest item a survivor has available to them. Flashlights are actively used along with medkits and maps, which makes them the most susceptible to a Franklin's user. Toolboxes are consumed so quickly that Franklin's may not matter at all. This means that the counterplay to Franklin's protects the strongest item in the game, at the very least. The second problem with this change is actually an old problem, the last second swap. Players who are trying to use flashlights and don't want to worry about Franklin's Demise are going to swap in the flashlight at the last second, preventing a killer from exchanging Franklin's in place of another perk. This tactic has fallen out of use since flashlights themselves have been nerfed and fewer survivors choose to run them very often. But this tactic will see a resurgence in order to protect those items from being destroyed during the course of the match thanks to Franklin's. A few changes that would be good would be if auras of all items on the ground were revealed, if fully depleted items were destroyed when hit by Franklin's, and a change to the lobby, preventing survivors from changing their loadouts before a killer could prepare for what they see in the lobby. To their credit, the perk changes they made aren't bad. In fact, one is great and the other three are almost good. They really only need a tweak or two to actually be good and useful, even with a counterplay that's available to them now. Unfortunately for players, the devs never change small things like this from the PTB to live. This means that these perks will remain as they are for years to come. Thankfully, the perks are unchanged for the most part in their function, but the same can't be said for the rest of the patch. In the next video, we'll talk about why the devs hate fun killers. Like the video if you liked the video, sub if you want to see more videos like this in the future, follow me on Twitter for a sneak peek on future videos, catch me on Twitch where I stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and join the Coconut Discord channel if you want to help shape the future of Coconut content. Until next time, I'll see you in the fog.